Thank you for joining us today for the virtual Sunday service with the Center for Creative Living. CCL, a charter of the Universal Church of the Master, has served and supported the spiritual needs of its community here in the Bay Area for over 20 years.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us from the Center of Creative Living. You'll notice that we're in a different location today. That's because on Sunday, Father's Day, there was a technical difficulty and the recording did not happen. Boo-hoo. But we always move forward anyway.
Yeah.
And I am fortunate enough to have this opportunity to introduce our Father's Day speaker, Tim Morrow, who studied for many years with Dr. J. Scott Neal. You'll notice, perhaps, that I am wearing a shirt with trains on it. I got this at the Sacramento Train Museum. If you haven't been there, I urge you to visit there. It's an amazing experience. Tim and I happen to share an interest in model railroading, a hobby that is handed down from father to son. And if you go to the museum, you'll see fathers and sons and grandsons enjoying the model railroads as well as the very large locomotives on the ground floor. It's a marvelous experience. The museum, plus the experience of creating a model railroad village, which is a very Father's Day thing to talk about. And I'm so excited that I got to share that with you. Tim's talk today is called Things to Remember. Please give a warm welcome to Tim Morrow.
Yay! Welcome!
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. That was the best introduction I've ever received. And good morning, and happy Father's Day, or happy belated Father's Day, and happy Juneteenth. To any fathers who are watching at this time, as well as moms who also played the role of father. This is your day too. So this morning I'd like to explore with you the subject of things to remember. That title comes from a song I wrote now many years ago for my daughter. And yes, I'll share it with you shortly. But first, I'd like to share with you the story, or actually a couple of stories, about how it came to be. So to begin at the beginning, let's go back to the year, well, somewhat late in 1999. And my wife at the time told me we were about to become parents. And that was my first reaction. Yay! But also, a bit of anxiety hit me. I knew I had done one thing right in marrying someone who would be a great mom. But for myself, so I did what I've often done when not so sure of myself. I sat down with my teacher and pastor and good friend, Dr. J. Scott Neal. And at first, he couldn't quite understand my trepidation. He said, wait, I had my first child at the age of 21. You're 34, you'll do fine. But I insisted, look, this is a human life I'm responsible for. I really need to get it right. I need to not screw up. I need to do better than my parents did. So he had a threefold answer to that. He said, number one, okay, you're not going to be a perfect mistake-free parent, because no one is. Just make sure she knows she's loved. And the mistakes you make will be quickly gotten over. She won't need to spend her entire adult life in therapy. 2, start working on forgiving your parents for the mistakes they made. Just as several speakers earlier this month had mentioned, they did the best they could with the understanding they had at the time. And 3, make a list of the things they did right and make that the beginning of your parental playbook. And so those 3 things have been my project for the past 22 years now. Now, let's fast forward to the year 2006. My now 6-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was definitely my top priority. And I was doing reasonably well. And I also spent time with my other child. That's Blackie over there.
Hey, Blackie!
Yay!
Yes, you can't turn the camera over there. That's my guitar. After a long hiatus, I was getting back into songwriting and playing and getting my voice somewhat in shape. And I came up with this tune that I was so proud of. Probably the best I'd ever done up until that time. I was thinking, how did I get this lucky? So much so that I had to give it the reality test. I had to go to several musician friends and play it and hum the tune and ask, could this be a popular song that I'd heard on the radio that I subconsciously stole? After getting enough input, I was finally convinced, yes, this is mine.
Yay!
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 But the problem was it needed lyrics, and I just couldn't come up with words that I felt were good enough for this thing I had just written. So I kind of put it on the back burner for a while until one day when Jennifer asked me if I could take the training wheels off of her bike and teach her to ride on 2 wheels. So I took the training wheels off and took her and the bike to the schoolyard down the street from where we lived and got her on the bike, held onto the seat and back, said, okay, start pedaling. And I ran along with them, holding the bike up, and told her, okay, now look straight ahead, try to balance, and let go, and right away, falling, grab the seat, let her fall. So we went along for a little while longer, and I said, okay, let's try it again. Look forward, try to balance. I let go. She held it up for a few seconds, but then very quickly the other way. Falling, grab the seat, keep running with it. Then a third time, we tried it again, and she stayed up a little bit longer than that this time, but again, falling, grab the seat, run with the bike. And during this time, I began to notice just how out of shape I was and how I really needed to exercise more. And so I stuck with it as long as I could. A dad's got to do what a dad's got to do. Until finally, I had to stop the bike, collapse against the school building, trying to catch my breath. And I told her, sorry, dear, we're going to have to continue this tomorrow. I'm spent. And she said, oh, that's okay, Dad. You rest. I think I'm getting it now. So she went off on her own, kind of wobbly and having to put her feet on the ground every so often, but still riding. That was the first lap. And then the second lap around, she was riding like the wind. She just took off as if she'd been riding for 20 years.
Yay!
So I thought, you go, girl. Still trying to catch my breath. Of course, I would have done it again the next day, but I was so thankful I didn't have to. But I also noticed that this was a paradigm shift that we often go through well, actually many times through our adulthood. It starts with that divine urge to move from where you are to where you could be and to experience more freedom. And like that child who gets on the two-wheeler for the first time, you're ready to move forward, you're ready to take off, but then there's this thing called gravity, ready to pull you down. And you resist that, but there's this thing called gravity on the other side, ready to pull you that other way. If you're religious, you might start praying, please God, make me immune to gravity. Fortunately, God's usually smart enough not to answer that prayer. But how many of you have ever had a version of that in some area of your life? Ready to experience more prosperity or more happiness, better relationships, or whatever you're thinking of at the moment. But there always seems to be so many facts always wanting to get in the way. Like, I'm too old, or I have this massive debt, or I'm not as handsome as George Clooney, or as pretty as Jennifer Lawrence.
Really?
Or I don't have enough education, or the worst one, I just don't deserve it because of the mistakes I've made in the past. Until you finally make up your mind to let go, get out of your own way, and then let that vision unfold in a way working in harmony with those facts. And then, some people say, let go and let God, if you want. And then start riding like the wind. So how many of you are ready to have your own version of that kind of paradigm shift?
I am.
Yes, for those of you watching the video, I see a sea of hands raised.
Yeah.
It's so important to remember that whatever your situation is, yes, those are the facts, and yes, they are real, but don't get facts mixed up or confused with truth. The truth of you and me and every other human being on planet Earth is that each of us is divine love expressing itself in a wonderful and unique way. Most people don't act like it, but it's still important to go back and recognize it first in yourself, and then it's a lot easier to recognize it in the rest of the world. Even those politicians you hear about on CNN, or that bozo who cut you off on the freeway on your way to work. Again, getting back to my teacher, Dr. J, he would often challenge me whenever I would get frustrated with something going on in my life by saying, Tim, you're not seeing the world as it is, you're seeing the world as you are. Now, let's start getting it healed. Those of you who know him can probably hear that Texas accent. First step, change what's going on in here. First and foremost. What is your self-definition? You feel like a victim? It's important to stop labeling yourself as a victim, and then the victimizers will be a lot less attracted to you. He would often use the analogy of the shape of the earth. You all know it's round, right? Or somewhat round.
Yeah.
And you may have heard of this growing trend, particularly in social media, of people who, in the 21st century, believe that the world is flat. They call themselves flat earthers. Well, to each his own. But it doesn't matter how many people take on a belief like that, it's not going to flatten out the earth. The earth will go on being what it is and always has been, but it will give the believer a flat experience. How many of you have ever had a flat experience on a round earth?
Oh, yeah.
When he was in a more poetic mood, he would explain it more like this. This is from his regular monthly article in Creative Thought magazine. I think this is from an early 90s issue, but he gives us these words. As we lift our consciousness from the narrow confines of human thinking, acting, and reacting to claim our innate ability to see beyond the obvious, we discover we can celebrate the truth of our existence and the actuality of everything, everywhere at once. The truth of divine mind may be hidden from us as the fog hides the beauty of the world around us, but the beauty and potential of the world is always there. Health, prosperity, and love are always there for us to see if we just choose to dispel the fog of doubt, fear, and confusion. So our challenge is to never forget the freedom of the child who's learning to ride the bicycle or the toddler taking their first steps, but also have the wisdom of the wisest adult. And remember that the two are not mutually exclusive. So in contemplating all this, as Jennifer was taking 3 or 4 more laps around the playground, I thought to myself, I really hope she remembers this. And that's when the words to the song started coming, like boom, boom, boom. That's a rare occurrence for me. Usually I need to sit down over several days and figure it out in small implements or even weeks. But that day it was just, wow, that's it. So I had to tell my daughter, time to ride that bike home. Your dad has a date with my guitar and a piece of paper. So now let's move in. I'll just move into the music chair here. Mm-hmm. And will this mic pick me up from over here? Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's go over some things to remember. So as I mentioned, this was originally written for my daughter, but today I invite you to dedicate it to yourself. You could say to the inner child, and maybe let it be a healing experience. Dear one, do you know what I know to be true? The world is so blessed because it has you. All the light and the love we see in your smile, and the joy and freedom that show in your eyes. You've given us the gift of music and creativity, kindness and intelligence. It's not hard for us to see. Just remember to always see it in yourself. Never wait to be reminded by someone else. Don't be afraid to catch your dream and bring it home in a jar. It's your divine inheritance when you remember who you are. You can go out and be whatever you have your heart set on. Just remember to always let love guide you along. Forget what you know to be true. The world is so blessed because it has you. Just be patient with yourself and realize the truth can always be seen when you open your eyes. The truth can always be seen when you open your eyes. The truth can always be seen when you open your eyes.
Yay! Perfect! Good job.
So for a quick epilogue here, when she came home last weekend from her summer break from UC Davis, this time driving her Toyota. She enjoyed that bike for several years, but has long since outgrown it. But we had lunch together, and she went over her plans for graduate school, applying to several graduate programs after she graduates next year, get her master's degree and move on into a career as a CPA. So I kept thinking to myself, yes, she probably doesn't remember that day at the schoolyard, but most of the time she has remembered the lesson from the day. Of course, out loud I said, "You go, girl." As we move into this coming week, I invite everyone to remember the truth of who and what you are. That is, again, divine spirit expressing itself in a wonderful and unique way. And that is the truth of our children and grandchildren. And the world is blessed because you're a part of it. So let it be your way.
Thank you.
Thank you.